in the first instance, but as a means of encounter, of eliciting from the partner community cues or cultural tokens of value to guide the co-creation of consistent and ongoing programs and social actions that are designed to provide over time the material and economic, as well as the spiritual and cultural conditions necessary for people's dignity. This is a tall order, but the expectations of religious actors is to be included in the larger public deliberation about achieving the common good, about achieving human security for all. And while this public deliberation begins with our own intra-religious and inter-religious engagement and collaboration, it cannot end there. Such interreligious collaboration has its own integrity. Interreligious partnerships, however, can become a step toward preparing our prophetic religious communities to engage governments, business, and civil society in a dialogue about human security, about human flourishing. In this way, our religious communities in dialogue may evolve naturally into a reliable and long-term partner with other world leaders in other sectors of society. This fundamental idea of shifting the engagement to a broader, more holistic and inclusive process is what many Muslim and Catholic leaders have been calling for, with a renewed energy and sense of common purpose. One significant moment in this evolution of our shared concern was the promulgation in 2015 of Pope Francis's social encyclical, Laudato Si, on care for our common home, about which I'm sure we'll hear more later. Francis and his allies have even set the fight against religious intolerance, religious extremism, in the context of a broader, comprehensive, religiously inspired agenda of constructive social change. The Pope has explicitly linked the concepts of integral ecology and integral human development, which are elaborated in Laudato Si and in other papal documents, such as the text of the Pope's 2015 address to the United Nations in support of the Sustainable Development Goals. He has linked these concepts of integral ecology and human development to his denunciations of religious violence and religious terrorism, presenting these concepts as the only plausible response to state-sponsored oppression and to religious reaction. At the Keough School of Global Affairs, where I'm the dean here at Notre Dame, our mission is indeed to advance integral human development as a conceptual framework resonant with our post-secular moment in the world, a moment where people recognize that religion's not going away, that the secularization thesis is kaput, and that we must move together with religious and secular people, and that even those terms don't capture the complexity of the fact that we are often guided by religious as well as non-religious ideas and motivations. So integral human development seems resonant with this moment, and we hope that it can serve as an inclusive and effective platform for religious and secular collaboration toward a shared peace and prosperity. Integral human development is presented in Catholic social teaching as the state of society in which respect for the dignity of the human person, manifested by ongoing efforts to secure the cultural and spiritual, as well as economic and material requirements of human flourishing, that is central to political and social life, upheld by the rule of law, and reflected in peaceful and just relations among religions, nations, states, and people. That's integral human development, focused on the dignity of the human person, but recognized as a whole person. IHD, Integral Human Development, is one conceptual framework within which peaceful, just, and inclusive societies can be imagined and envisioned. It also has the potential to authorize and shape a new kind of interreligious engagement, a more robust engagement, inclusive of all players, who recognize that the protection of the environment is, in fact, to quote Pope Francis, an integral part of the development process and cannot be considered in isolation from it. We all know that everything is connected. And IHD, Integral Human Development, has this holistic vision of the individual human person who is not merely homo economicus or a producer or consumer of goods, but also a believer, a member of a family, a creator of art. All of this is part of what it means to be a human person. And furthermore, we need people from all sectors and walks of life to contribute to a holistic vision of the planet. What that means for an academic unit like the Keough School is really breathtaking. We err often here by being too bold, too ambitious, but so we are. This means that we at the Keough School must include disciplines, sectors of society, problem solvers from all points of the compass. This is a daunting and invigorating task. We won't solve climate change only through the engineers or the scientists, only through the healthcare officials, only through the ethicists. All hands must be on deck. Again, Pope Francis puts a fine point on this holistic vision. Quote, "We urgently need a humanism capable of bringing together the different fields of knowledge, including economics, in the service of a more integral and integrating vision. Today, the analysis of environmental problems cannot be separated from the analysis of human, family, work-related, and urban context, nor from how individuals relate to themselves, which leads in turn how they relate to others and to the environment. If everything is related, then the health of a society's institutions has consequences for the environment and the quality of human life." Earlier, I mentioned that IHD, Integral Human Development, is one framework. We ask regularly at the Keough School and at Notre Dame, is this framework sufficiently inclusive, first of all, of Islam? Or shall we revisit IHD itself within our interreligious collaboration to craft a vision, a platform even more inclusive of Islamic visions and imperatives about the good, about human flourishing? I hope I have raised a few sufficiently challenging questions for all of you in these opening remarks. Now I shall stand back and relax and listen to you solve all of these global puzzles. Thank you again for being with us, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Dean Scott Appleby, for this wonderful opening remarks. And your wisdom and expertise as sharp as 10 years ago when I was a student at your place. And I learned a lot. Still, I benefiting like thousand miles away, benefiting from your wisdom today. Now it's my honor to introduce our opening remarks presenter, His Excellency, Dr. Ali Rashid Al-Nuami. Dr. Ali Nuami is a member of the Federal Council Union, the UAE's National Congress. He is the chairman of the Committee of Foreign, Interior, and Defense Affairs. And he's also more known for his expertise on counter-violent extremism. And he is the chairman of International Steering Board of the Hadayat International Center for Counter-Violent Extremism Center, which is the actually global initiative funded by more than 30 countries around the world, including USA and China and many global powers. A very true, indeed, international cooperation body. And he is also an accomplished educator. He was the chancellor of the United Arab Emirates University, the true national university of the United Arab Emirates, this young country. And he also served as the director of the Department of Education and Knowledge Development of the Abu Dhabi Emirates in the country. More importantly, he recently has published both in Arabic and in English the very important work called The National State, where he laid out the importance of national identity in countering extremism and fundamentalism and build the new citizens and new believers in Muslim societies and beyond. Without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Ali Rashid Al-Nuami to give us opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah. First of all, distinguished guests, it's an honor for me to be part of this webinar. At the beginning, I'd like to thank the Ansari Institute, University of Notre Dame, His Holiness Sheikh Ali Jum'ah, and all the participants. You know, I like to emphasize, you know, I'm really happy to see that Professor Abilbi is part of this, such an international figure come forward actually at this time to be part of an initiative where I see that the role of academicians and religious leaders actually should be there, where all humanities are facing so many challenges. And we saw in the past that, you know, religion has played a bad role in dividing us. But now we see that, you know, the good side of religion, where we see a brave religious leaders coming forward, creating initiatives that, you know, bring people, regardless of their religion, regardless of their nationality, regardless of their ethnic, to come together and promote the common value that we share as a human being and try to counter the challenges that we are facing as a human being. You know, the world has faced COVID-19 virus, and it was a challenge for all nations. But there is lesson that should be learned from this challenge actually. That there is issue that, you know, is a threat to us, not because of our religion, not because of our nationality, not because of our color or our ethnic, but because we are human being. So we share the threat because we are human. And this is why we should come together as a human being to counter this challenge. And this is where I see that, you know, and sometimes whenever there is a challenge, there is opportunity. So in COVID-19, we saw the opportunity. Now, because it's the day where the world has come together to counter the climate change, I think, you know, we, because of this event that we are having religious leaders, having outstanding academicians, we send a message that we have a role to play as religious leaders, as academicians, to bring the world together and work together to face the challenges that we consider a threat to the world, to the whole world, not a threat to a single region or to a single religion or to a single nation. This is why, you know, I'm really happy to see that this event, you know, bringing together religious leaders, bringing academicians to play a role that we think we can consider it a roadmap for the future, where we need the focus of religious leaders and academician also, to come together and work together, to face the same challenges. We need to build bridges between us, bridges of respect, trust, and collective effort to counter the threat that we face as a human being. And I think what we are doing in this webinar, an example, we need to build on it, and we need also from it to move forward with initiatives and programs that will have an impact and will send a message to the world that when we work together, we can make a difference. When we come together, regardless of our differences in religion, nationality, ethnic colors, we can do things and we can make a change. Today, the world leaders came together and spoke about this challenge and made a good and a serious commitment to face this challenge. I want the same thing, to happen from the religious leaders, community leaders, and also from academicians, that we want to commit to try to work together to create a better world when it comes for the new generation, in order to share all the natural resources and to protect our earth from a threat challenge that we will not be able to counter it unless we work together and come together. I wish you, a very successful webinar, and I'd like to thank you again for being part of it. And I hope that soon we'll be able to do such event in presence instead of Zoom. Thank you very much.
Dr. Ali Rashid Al-Mahami, thank you so much. This was very eloquently and powerfully said. And Shaljan, thank you for jumping in there for me. I was muted on my end. So the guys behind the scenes are doing a great job, but now I'm messing up on my end. So thank you for filling in for me there. Just a reminder to those who might be joining us at this very moment, the conversation is available in English and Arabic. So again, if you'll look down to the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will see an icon that allows you to choose the language of your preference, whether it be English or Arabic. And time is getting away from us, so I would like to go ahead and move forward now and introduce to you one of our keynote speakers, the Bishop of the Diocese of Fort Wayne South Bend, the Most Reverend Kevin C. Rhodes. Bishop Rhodes serves as chair of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops Committee on Doctrine. He is also a member of the USCCB Administrative Committee, as well as the Committee on Religious Liberty. Bishop Rhodes is a member of the Board of Directors of Catholic Relief Services, and just on a personal note, my oldest daughter graduated from St. Joseph Catholic Grade School in South Bend, and my youngest daughter is still in attendance, and Bishop Rhodes, they are both looking forward to listening to you later this week once this recording is made available. So now, without further ado, Most Reverend Bishop Rhodes, thank you for joining us and speaking on the topic of how important it is for Catholics to do their part in conjunction with other faith traditions to care for our common planet. Bishop Rhodes, you have the microphone.
Thank you very much, Dr. Powell, for your kind invitation to participate in this Catholic-Muslim conversation on care for our common planet. And I was asked to speak on this topic from a Catholic perspective. And immediately I thought, of course, of Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si and its title, On Care for Our Common Home. That corresponds to our conversation topic today, care for our common planet. Our common planet is our common home. And we, Catholics and Muslims, along with all our brothers and sisters in the human family, inhabit this home and share a common responsibility to safeguard the environment of our planet, our home, while we journey through this life towards our ultimate home, our heavenly home, and towards what the book of Revelation in our Christian tradition calls the new heaven and the new earth. The foundation of Catholic teaching on care for our planet is found in the first chapter of the book of Genesis. The very first pages of the Bible teach us that creation came forth from God's word, and that all that God created, including the earth, he created good. The order and the beauty of creation reveals the Creator and his love. The summit of his creation is the human person, male and female, created in his image and likeness. And God blessed these creatures he created in his image and likeness and said, "Be fertile and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and all the living things that move on the earth." They are to do so as stewards, not owners of God's creation. Psalm 24 says, "The Lord's are the earth and its fullness, the world and those who dwell in it." The Catholic Church understands man's dominion over the earth not as absolute domination. In fact, the Catholic Church teaches in interpreting chapter 3 of Genesis that man and woman's original sin disrupted the harmony between God, humankind, and the created world. The work of exercising dominion over the earth, caring for it as stewards, was disrupted by sin, with the result being a selfish desire for domination and the exploitation of creation, of the earth, our common home. Catholic teaching emphasizes that the environment is God's gift to all people. It's a gift to be respected. Lack of due respect for it ultimately harms humanity. 50 years ago, this year, Pope St. Paul VI pointed out that by an ill-considered exploitation of nature, man risks destroying it and becoming in his turn the victim of this degradation. There has been a rich development of Catholic teaching on the environment during the pontificates of Pope St. John Paul II, Pope Benedict XVI, and Pope Francis. These popes have said that the Church cannot be indifferent in the face of the serious environmental problems the world faces. There is an ecological crisis that threatens our common home. We have a grave responsibility to exercise responsible stewardship of creation and to care for our common home. The popes have said that we have a responsibility to work with all of our brothers and sisters in the human family to protect the environment, to safeguard natural resources and the climate. Humanity is one great family with the earth as our common house, and we have a responsibility to future generations to care for the earth that will one day be their home. The Church teaches that human beings are of supreme value in relation to all of creation. We do not consider material nature or animals as more important than humans. We reject currents of neo-paganism or of pantheism, which exalt nature at the expense of humans. At the same time, we reject the idea of nature at our complete disposal for our own selfish use. As Pope Benedict XVI once wrote, "The natural environment is more than raw material to be manipulated at our pleasure. It is a wondrous work of the Creator, containing a grammar which sets forth ends and criteria for its wise use, not its reckless exploitation." And furthermore, the Catechism of the Catholic Church states the following: "Each creature possesses its own particular goodness and perfection. Each of the various creatures, willed in its own being, reflects in its own way a ray of God's infinite wisdom and goodness. Man must therefore respect the particular goodness of every creature to avoid any disordered use of things." The foundational principle of Catholic social teaching is our responsibility to protect the life and dignity of the human person. In teaching about ecology, the popes often speak about human ecology, emphasizing that human life and dignity must remain at the forefront in consideration of environmental issues. In fact, natural ecology and human ecology really go together. Our responsibility for protection of human life cannot be separated from the responsibility for protection of all creation. We have the responsibility of protecting the earth, water, and air as gifts of God the Creator. Not doing so puts humanity in danger of self-destruction. Caring for our common home is a moral duty. We must be concerned about climate change, deforestation, pollution of air and water, the loss of biodiversity, and the depletion of natural resources. This is related to human ecology. For example, those living in the poorer areas of our world are especially threatened by the environmental crisis. And as I mentioned, we have a moral duty to future generations. Our solidarity with others in the human family, a key principle of Catholic social teaching, also applies to those who will inhabit this planet after us. Solidarity with our children, grandchildren, and future generations. Solidarity across national borders in the world, and solidarity across time. Pope Francis's teaching on ecology reflects the development of Catholic teaching in this area and has raised its level of authority by issuing an encyclical, the first papal encyclical on the environment, Laudato Si, on care for our common home. Pope Francis reiterates and builds on the teaching of his predecessors. In chapter 1, he gives a fresh analysis of what is happening to our common home, looking at pollution, climate change, the issue of water, the loss of biodiversity, and then the decline in the quality of human life and global inequality. He laments the weak responses to these problems. Then in the rest of the encyclical, the Pope presents Catholic Church teaching on creation and looks at the roots of the ecological crisis. He calls for an integral ecology that respects its human and social dimensions. The Holy Father offers lines of approach and action, and he makes an urgent appeal for a new dialogue about how we're shaping the future of our planet. Pope Francis highlights the urgency of the challenge we face and encourages religions to dialogue for the sake of protecting nature. And finally, in his encyclical Fratelli Tutti, issued last year, Pope Francis taught about fraternity and social friendship. And he recalled the joint declaration on human fraternity that he issued with the Grand Imam Ahmad Al-Tayeb in Abu Dhabi. It seems appropriate to mention this declaration at this Catholic-Muslim conversation today. The Pope and the Grand Imam proclaimed that God has called all human beings to live together as brothers and sisters, to fill the earth and make known the values of goodness, love, and peace. In Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis called on believers from different religions to recognize one another as traveling companions, truly brothers and sisters, and to work together for the common good. Certainly, the care for our common planet, our common home, is a very important area where we can and should work together in fraternity for the sake of our human family today and in the future. May God, the Creator, inspire us, Catholics and Muslims, to protect our common home. Thank you.
Amen. Bishop Rhodes, thank you so much for sharing with us. According to the original schedule, Dr. Ali Guma was going to be our second keynote speaker. He is going to be speaking a bit later in the program between panels 1 and 2. So at this time, we are going to begin with panel 1, Scriptures and Sustainability, Islamic and Catholic Perspectives on Humanity and the Planet. We do have 2 speakers for each panel, and after both speakers have spoken, we will present them with questions that you have submitted. So please submit your questions to us by clicking the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. And I believe now I'll be turning it over to Dr. Chai.
Thank you so much, Charles, for the moderating this opening and the keynote session. I just saw Sheikh Ali Guma came back from his iftar, the fast breaking, but we will continue with panel 1. Then after this, he will speak. So it's my great honor to introduce our first panelist. Oh, he's here. So, but Sheikh, okay. Dear audience, let's have Sheikh Ali Juma to speak.
أنا مستعد للكلام الآن.
Charles, will you mind let him speak now?
Absolutely, go right
Yes.
ahead. Just a reminder to our audience, you may need to click the interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen.
Yeah, please.
Dr. Ali, please.
نعم. احنا عاملينها على العربي. I am ready.
The microphone is yours.
تفضل دكتور علي جوما تفضل.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. التحية كل التحية.
I would like to
لجميع
welcome
الإخوة
you all,
المشاركين.
brothers and sisters.
وشكرا لكم لإشراكي في هذا المجهود الرائع الذي بدأناه منذ أكثر من 20 عاما، ولكنه يحتاج إلى أن يستمر دائما. وأخص بالشكر صديقي القديم أبل بي، وأنا أتذكره وقد تعاوننا من قبل كثيرا، ولكل واحد منكم باسمه أخصه بالتحية والتقدير. عندي كلمة أريد فيها أن أؤصل نظريا موقف الإنسان من الكون وخاصة من الأرض في يوم مثل هذا اليوم الذي نعيشه الآن، وهو يوم الأرض. وثانيا المبادرات التي تنطلق من هذا التصور النظري الموجود. عندنا في الإسلام أن كل ما حولنا هو يعبد الله ويسبح الله سبحانه وتعالى، وأننا في إيماننا بالله فإننا نكون متسقين مع الكون. فعندنا أن الجماد وأن الحيوان وأن الطير في السماء وأن السماء والأرض تسبح بحمد الله سبحانه وتعالى وتعبده، وإن من شيء إلا يسبح بحمده ولكن لا تفقهون تسبيحهم. يسجد له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض. شعور المسلم أن هذا الكون الذي يحيط بنا يسجد لله ويسبح الله يجعله يتعامل معه تعاملا رفيقا من غير عنف. ومن هنا تأتي الآداب الإسلامية والأخلاق التي نربي عليها أبنائنا بالرفق، وأن الرفق هو مفتاح رضا الله سبحانه وتعالى. حتى إن أول حديث نعلمه لأبنائنا ارحموا من في الأرض يرحمكم من في السماء. فنحن مبدأنا هو الرفق والرحمة بكل الكائنات المحيطة بنا. هذا الأساس النظري يجعلنا لا نؤدي إلى إهلاك المحميات أو إهلاك الغابات أو الصرف حتى في الأكل والشرب. وكلوا واشربوا ولا تسرفوا إنه لا يحب المسرفين. علمنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أن نحب هذا الكون، ولذلك مر على أحد فقال: أحد جبل
said, Uhud is a
يحبنا
mountain
ونحبه
that we love
بالرغم أن
and
هذا
he loves
المكان
us, even
لاقى
though
فيه المسلمون هزيمة في
location
المعارك العسكرية
where the Muslims were
إلا أن
defeated.
النبي أراد أن يعلم
But
الناس
Prophet
أجمعين
Muhammad wanted to teach
من بعده
people
إلى
for
يوم
the
الدين
following generation till the day
أننا
of
لا
judgment that
نتشائم بمثل
we
هذه
don't
الأحداث
feel
الواقعة
pessimistic because of this
لأننا
location
نحب
or
الكون
because
في
of the
ذاته
events that happened
ومن
in
أحب
this
شيئا
location.
بنى
And
من هذا الحب
when you
الكثير
love
من
this,
التعامل
you
الصحيح
build a
مع
lot of
الأرض
correct
التي
way
هي
how to deal between the
مصدر
earth,
غذائنا
as the earth is
مصدر
the source of
دوائنا
our food,
مصدر
the source of our
كسائنا
medicine, the
مصدر
source of the
مساكننا
clothes, the
فكل هذه
source of our
الأشياء إنما
houses.
أتت من
For
الأرض
all
ومن هنا
come from
عد
the earth.
المسلمون الأرض
And also
كعنصر من عناصر
Muslims
الإنتاج
consider the earth as part
ولم
of
يذهبوا
this
المذاهب
system.
الحديثة التي
Also
رأت
for
أن
the
الأرض
current
ليست عنصرا من
system,
عناصر الإنتاج
some
فالإنسان
people say
يحافظ
the
على
earth is
هذا
not part
العنصر
of this
محافظته على
production system.
حياته
But no,
وعلى
people need to
مستقبله
protect
آيات
this
كثيرة
earth.
جدا
There
ضمنتها
are
في
many verses
كتابي
from the Holy
البيئة
Quran that I put it in
الذي
my book,
ترجم
The
إلى اللغة
Environment,
الإنجليزية
which was translated to English language.
وأحاديث كثيرة جدا
And also
وتوجيهات
there
وأحكام
are a
كثيرة
lot of hadith
تتعلق
or
بالماء
texts
وتتعلق
related
بالهواء
to
وتتعلق
water, air,
بمقاومة
or
التلوث
even fighting
السمعي
pollution.
البصري
Here we talk
الهوائي
about all
جميع
type of
أنواع التلوث
pollutions.
فالإسلام
So
يدعو
Islam
إلى
here
مقاومتها
always
وعدم
invite
إنشاء
to protect
أي
the
ما
environment.
يعكر الصفو فيها. نتعاون مع إخواننا الكاثوليك ونتعاون أيضا في قلب مفتوح مع الناس أجمعين في الشرق وفي الغرب منذ أكثر من ربع قرن ونحن نتعاون من أجل الحفاظ على البيئة ومن أجل محاولة إعادة هذه البيئة إلى سابق عهدها. اشتغلنا على تنمية الإنسان لأننا أمرنا بذلك في الدين. الدين له دور عظيم ومهم وخطير ومؤثر ولذلك لا بد علينا أن نستمر لأن أحب الأعمال إلى الله أدومها وإن قل فإن كان كثيرا ودائما ظهرت النتيجة وهذا التصور للكون أنه يسبح وأنه يعبد وأننا في اتساق وانسجام معه وأنه مسخر لنا فيجب علينا أن نتعامل معه برفق وأنه يجب علينا أيضا أن نتدبره وأن نعتبر ونتمتع بالجمال الذي خلقه الله سبحانه وتعالى وألا نفسد في الأرض سواء في مجال الجماد أو في مجال الحيوان أو في مجال الإنسان الذي هو على قمة الخلق كما أراده الله سبحانه وتعالى. هذه النظرة وهذا المنطلق يدفعنا إلى النقطة الثانية وهي إنشاء مبادرات. هذه المبادرات تهتم بالإنسان تهتم بالحيوان تهتم بالأكوان تهتم بهذا الكون حتى يكون بيئة صالحة أكثر صلاحا وأكثر تهيئة لتحقيق السعادة. سعادة الدنيا هدف من أهداف الدين وسعادة الآخرة أيضا ونحن نعود إلى الله سبحانه وتعالى أيضا هدف من أهداف الدين فسمي بذلك تلك العبارة الشهيرة عندنا سعادة الدارين. فسعادة الدارين تتمثل في سعادة الحياة الدنيا. نريد أن نقاوم الأمراض نريد أن نسيطر على قضايا الفقر والجهل نريد أن نحسن بيئتنا حتى تكون بيئة صالحة. هذه المبادرات أنشأنا من أجلها بعض
we establish for
المؤسسات
them a
في
number of
بلادنا
establishments
منها
and
مؤسسة
institutions in our
أجيال
countries, including
ومنها قيم
أجيال
وحياة
and قيم
وغير
وحياة
ذلك كثير
and
ومنها
other
مصر
many other
الخير ومنها
initiatives
قوافل
and
الخير
مصر
وكلها
الخير and
تهدف إلى هدف
الخير
واحد
caravans,
وهو
and all of them
الإنسان
seek to
وما
achieve a single
يحيط
objective,
بالإنسان.
which is ensuring
أنشأنا
prosperity for people and everything around them.
مؤسسات
We have
تعد
established a number
مبادرات
of institutions
وعددنا
which
هذه
launch initiatives.
المبادرات
We counted those
لأكثر من
initiatives. They are
130
more than
مبادرة
130
كلها
initiatives.
تهدف في
All
النهاية
of them
إلى
include
خدمة
at the end
البيئة
of the day the
خدمة
main
الكون
objective, which is
خدمة الأرض.
protecting humanity,
نرجو الله
protecting the
سبحانه
planet,
وتعالى
protecting the environment.
أن
We supplicate Almighty
يعيننا
Allah
أن نكمل
to enable us
هذا
to
الطريق
continue this
لأنه طريق
approach and this journey,
يسبب
because
السعادة
this
للإنسان.
is a journey that will take
ونحن
humanity towards happiness.
نشتغل بقلب
We
مفتوح.
have an open heart and we
والكاثوليك
walk with an open heart.
إخواننا
And Catholics
نتعاون
are our
معهم
brothers and
منذ
sisters.
فترة
We have been
طويلة
collaborating with them for a
إلا
long period of
أننا
time.
ننبه
Yet
أننا
we need to point
والكاثوليك
out that we
على
and
النصف من
Catholics
الأرض أو أكثر
only
4
represent
مليار من
4
8
billions out of
فنحن
8
أيضا
billions.
نفتح
So
قلوبنا
we are also
للأربعة
dealing
الآخرين
with an open
أو
heart with the
أقل
other
أو
4
أكثر.
billions of people
نحن نفتح
who are neither Catholics
قلوبنا
nor
لكل
Muslims.
إنسان
We are
خلقه الله
open
سبحانه
to
وتعالى وما
dealing
دام
kindly
قد
with
خلقه
all
فقد
human
أحبه
beings. Since Almighty Allah
ومنطلقنا
created them,
هو
then
الحب
Almighty Allah loves them.
ومنطلقنا
So
هو
our
الرحمة
main concept is love and
ومنطلقنا
compassion.
هو الرفق
Our main concept and
ومنطلقنا
main approach
هو
is
وتعاونوا
gentleness
على البر
and
والتقوى
being
ولا
able to
تعاونوا
join
على
hands to
الإثم
achieve what is
والعدوان.
good and not to join hands
سعيد
to do
أنني
evil. I'm very happy
بينكم
to
في
be with
هذا
you
اليوم
today
الأغر.
in this
أشكر
wonderful
كل من
evening. I would
ساهم
like to thank all
في
those
وجودي
who
معكم.
have
كل عام وأنتم
organized
بخير.
this webinar. I
كل
would like
سنة
to
إن
wish
شاء
you all the
الله
best
نفعل
and wish
شيئا
you many happy returns. And I hope that
كخطوة
every year
من
we will
الخطوات
take
في
one
طريق
more step
طويل لا
on a long
ينتهي ولا
journey.
يعرف
It may be an
النهاية
endless journey.
لأنه
It may
سيستمر
not have an end because it
باستمرار
will
الحياة.
continue as long as
شكرا
life
لكم.
exists. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sheikh Dr. Ali Gouma, former Grand Mufti of Arab Republic of Egypt, for sharing this wonderful and insightful perspective from Islamic religion on countering climate change and to invite all the believers from the global to present our compassion, our care to save our common home. Dr. Ali Gouma, again, is a very accomplished scholar, as you see from his talk now. He not only he gave fatwas on many Islamic issues, but also he helped the UNHCR, human refugee agencies, to mobilize zakat, the donations to help those in need. So fully accomplished author and even the practitioner. I'm sure his words and his action will inspire more, and including the panelists today, to push forward our common action to care our home and to counter climate change. Next, please, we give a mic to Charles to continue our panel one.
Again, thank you, Dr. Gouma, and thank you, Dr. Chai. Well, at this time, we'll pick back up with panel one, Scriptures and Sustainability, Islamic and Catholic Perspectives on Humanity and the Planet. As mentioned earlier, we have 2 speakers for each panel. After both speakers have spoken, we will present them with questions that you, the audience, submit to us. So please submit your questions to us by clicking in the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. I am pleased to introduce Reverend Terence Erman, who is with the Congregation of Holy Cross. Father Terry is a visiting assistant professional specialist in the Department of Theology at the University of Notre Dame. He has several publications. One of particular interest to this conversation was published in 2018 entitled Serene Attentiveness to Creator and Creation. Father Terry, thank you for joining us. We are listening. You have the microphone.
Thank you very much, Dr. Powell. It's wonderful to be with all of you, and A special greeting to all of our Muslim brothers and sisters, Ramadan Kareem. And so I just want to present from a Catholic perspective, who is God and what is God calling us as the children of Adam to do regarding creation and our environment? So I'd just like to start to give you a sense for those who are across the world of what our campus looks like at the University of Notre Dame. And there are all these amazing, beautiful redbud trees that are blooming across our campus. And I think the beauty of anything that is in creation points the believer to God, the Creator. As the Book of Wisdom says in Scripture, for from the greatness and the beauty of created things, their original author by analogy is seen. So I just wanted to give you a sense of some of that beauty here in Eastern North America and how it lifts the hearts and minds of believers to God, the Creator, who is one. And Catholics certainly believe that there is the one God who's creator of all things, who is holy and full of power, who creates out of his love, and that freedom of God to create where there was nothing before reveals to us the inner life of a God of love and calls us into share in that life of God. So God, who creates through his word and his wisdom, as Bishop Rhodes had said earlier, everything that God creates is seen as good, and 7 times it's depicted as good. I think the climax of the creation story in the first chapter of Genesis, and a little bit of chapter 2, is the Sabbath itself, where God rests and delights upon what God has created and is creating. So I think that chapter of Genesis where God creates everything is not just a cosmogony, an origins of the universe and the cosmos, but also a sabbatogony, that is the origins of the Sabbath. That all of creation finds its fulfillment and meaning in praising God. And the Sabbath itself gives human access to the inner rhythm of creation itself. Humans are created in the image and likeness of God. We're created to speak on behalf of all of creation, to direct our praise and worship and thanksgiving to the one who has created everyone. But this dominion is not absolute, but relative and delegated. How do we act within the logic of the nature that God has created? He who orders all things well, as the Book of Wisdom says. God creates with an order and a reason and understanding. So all of creation points to God. From a Christian perspective, it also points to Jesus Christ as the Word of God. So in John's Gospel, it begins, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came to be through him, and without him nothing came to be. So God creates through his logos, his word, his reason, his understanding, his logic, his wisdom. And how do we, as Christians, how do we act in accord with that nature? Now for Christians, that creator logos has also become the incarnate logos. And the word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. That Christians who worship God and Christ on Sunday in the Eucharist should also be Christians who are intimately concerned with the natural world around them. That indoor Christians, so to speak, should also be outdoor Christians. God is not only the creator, but also, as St. John says in the New Testament, the Pantocrator, that is the all-ruler, the Lord Almighty, the sovereign Lord, the providential provider. Psalm 104 speaks of this. How varied are your works, O Lord. In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your creatures. All of these look to you to give them food in due time. Send forth your spirit, they are created, and you renew the face of the earth. That God creates and sustains not only human life, but all life. That there's an intrinsic goodness to everything before there's an instrumental goodness in how we can use this world. In the garden story of Eden from the book of Genesis, there's this fourfold relationality. Humans have a relationship to God, to our own self, to our neighbor, and to the created world. But through sinful desires, we've alienated ourselves from them, from all those relationships. And in a Christian dispensation, right, Christ has come to restore all of those relationships, to restore our relationship to God, to have an integrity of the self, and to desire and to will the good, to have a compassionate and merciful care for our neighbor that also, by analogy, extends out to creation. I think what Pope Francis and other popes have been calling us to is what's called ecological conversion. That how do we respect this common good that God has given us? That caring for creation is not separate from a relationship with Jesus Christ and being a Christian, but it's intrinsic to it. A friend and colleague of mine has said that ignorance of creation is ignorance of the Creator. And I think particularly from a Christian perspective, to call Christians to act in accord with how do we respond to the ecological crises of our day, that ignorance of creation is also ignorance of Christ. That if a Christian looks at that redbud tree, one should encounter God and even Christ in and through it. To have a sacramental aspect of a vision of creation, that we can encounter God in and through creation. When God creates everything in and through his logos, he implants a small l logos, a thought or word in each created thing. That is that divine presence in each thing. That redbud tree becomes not just an object, but a personal word addressed to us by the Creator. So how do we as Christians see the world as a book of nature that is written from God for us? So we have the book of nature and the book of Scripture, these two ways to encounter the one God. Just in the few seconds I have left, God didn't create, as the prophet Isaiah said, the world to be an empty waste, but he designed it to be lived in. I am the Lord and there is no other. Turn to me and be safe, all you ends of the earth. How do we turn to God and worship and praise, to give our thanks and praise to the Creator? And how do we show that by our acts of mercy and compassion and tenderness to the created world that belongs to him? So with that, I will end my talk early just to keep on time, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Father Terry, for this wonderful talk on Catholic scriptures on environmental protection and God commandment on the human's responsibility to environmental protection. Next, we're going to move to our second panelist, Professor Fachruddin Mangunjaya. As I said in the beginning, he is joining us from Indonesia, Jakarta. And as a chairman of Islamic Center of National University of Jakarta, Dr. Ruddin is very accomplished author and very renowned eco-activist in the Muslim world. And he drafted Islamic Declaration for climate change with other renowned scholars and religious leaders. And he also has written a book both in his own native language and in English on the Islamic eco-activism or Islamic environmentalism. And I'm sure he will bring a lot of both theoretical and practical knowledge from his experience as an Islamic eco-activism. Please, mic is yours, Dr. Ruddin. I think you have you can share your. Go ahead, Dr.
Okay,
Ruddin.
thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Amma ba'du. Respected speakers, Saeed Aliyoma, all the brothers and sisters in humanity, thank you for letting me, inviting me for this session in a very blessed month of Ramadan, as well for the commemorating the Earth Day. Allow me to share my presentation. This is more the sharing experience and practicalities to ground the scriptures and sustainability and in Indonesian way of action. Of course, you might have many other variety of approach for conservation of the environment through the religious or faith. But our Indonesian experience might perhaps also might inspiring the others religious as well, other colleagues from the Islamic world, of how we implement the revelation to action. This is very interesting because we as we know, and Indonesia is 89 to 90% in Muslim. So we are easily engaged with the ulama and the clerics at the grassroots level. But how to bridging that kind of new things on environmental science and environmental challenge to inspiring them with the Islamic ethics to the environment. So this first presentation about the Islamic ethic on environment is very important. I'm not willing to rewind what Professor Sheikh Ali Gomez said very interestingly of Islamic perspective on the environment, that everything on earth is chanting and glory the God. Yusabbihu lahu ma fis samawati wa ma fil ard. And through Quran, through Sunnah, the Hadith of the and the Hadith and the Prophet Muhammad example, the jurists also have their own way of school of thoughts for the mazhab and everything. We understand there is the one thing that we should get together is the Ijma al-Ulama, the scholar consensus. Let me say that a scholar consensus that we can say here in Indonesia. In Indonesia, we have Islamic Council of Ulama. I am an academic as well activist. I'm not really an authoritative author. If I wrote about Islam and environment, I wrote Islam and environment, but how will that Islam and environment going into practice? So we going to the ulama. We going to the ulama, we ask them to create a fatwa, a non-binding advisory through Islamic perspective. This fatwa have been also implemented 40 years ago by the government of Indonesia, who is working together with the ulama together, the Muslim Ulama Council of Indonesia. And just previously 10 years, we are getting about 6 or 7 fatwa on environment and Islamic perspective. This is helping us to translate how the Islamic teaching going grounded, how the scripture are going grounded, and easily then we academia, because we are helping the dissemination as well, the campaign more easiest. For example, we recently have this 2014, which I also involved and protect the inquiry of a fatwa to the MUI, Islamic Council of Ulama of Indonesia, for the protection of wildlife, for the balance of the ecosystem. We invited academia. We facilitated the ulama visiting the nature and we let them see what happened in the natural areas and let them have a dialogues with the locals. So this is also happened with the, in 2016, there's a law of burning land and forests, which is related to climate change. And we understand that 70 to 80% the emission is in Indonesia and in many developing countries are coming from the land and burning forests. This is why it is important to have an ulama fatwa regarding this. What is the position of burning land and forests? Because it impact to climate and climate change. And we have also some scheme in the national level. For example, in the state level, we have green sukuk. Green sukuk, this is green investment, where Indonesian, using Islamic approach for the sustainability. So this sukuk or green bond is leveraging private finance for sustainable development. So this kind of, because of Muslim like their everything related to their faith. So the investment going easily to collect the investment for the climate, biodiversity, renewable energy, and things that related to sustainable development. We have also collect the zakat and and wakaf. So either that with the formal from the state, or we have also some bodies of zakat or organization that collect that, also for the sake for the environment. This is one example that we act together. If you have a time, just browse this Muslim cleric preaching for Indonesia. Pete, this is a news from the BBC related to our work with the cleric, how to protect the environment, from working together with the government, academia, and the Islamic Council of Ulama in protecting, prohibiting for burning for the forest. This is the wildlife fatwa resource training, all the modules that we create from academic, and we're working together with Islamic Council of Ulama and train the grassroots clerics or ustad, satis, which is they are on the grassroots level. The problem is environment, they understand the environment, but the relation, like what we said, that many complexities that they might not understand. So we train the imam, we translate the revelation or the text to the context. This is the module, and the other is the khutbah. The khutbah or the sermon and the prayer we create together with the local context. And the other thing we also are working together is we have the pesantren, Islamic boarding school or madrasa. Islamic boarding school, we have 2,000 to 27,000 with the total student 4 million. You can imagine the future generation if they are not encounter with the Islamic problem, with the Islamic, only with the Islamic knowledge, but we have to also introduce them with the environmental science and its environmental ethic for the environment. So some of the pesantren of Islamic school already established their way of how to become green. This is using bamboo with the building, for example, and the masjid opening for the light, and there are also some example of pesantren that involving their communities for the economy and also for the green agriculture, avoiding pesticide and everything for the healthy of the planet.
Dr. Rudy, can you wrap up in 1 minute? Yeah,
okay.
1 minute.
Okay, this is the pesantren also using solar panel. And in another place also planting trees. This is planting trees by the Ustad in their complex of school involving. And we have Eco Masjid program. Eco Masjid program, you can browse it, ecomasjid.id. We have 800,000 masjid. And we have the forest for wakaf per forest. Wakaf per forest. We buy land for forest. You can plant tree in wakaf, and you can let the animal being live there endlessly. And this is the cleric that we have trained from the university, and together with Islamic Council of Ulama, and all of these about 1,000 of them. Thank you very much. Just slightly to accommodate, if you have any question, please visit our Pesantren and our Center for Islamic Studies. There are some resources that you can download that video and everything that can use for the source for Islam and environment. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you both. Dr. Chai, I believe you have a question for one of our panelists.
Yes, do you have, I have a question. I'll just read it out from our Facebook audience. Saving environment requires interfaith action that bring together Catholic and Muslim in creative initiatives. What the most important creatives the speakers or the practitioners today, they think this common initiative can be, you know, I think it's a little bit broad question, but I think it's give a little bit free, you know, free thought for everyone can contribute. See what is the initiative should be there for this common initiative. That's my question from the audience. Yeah, Charles, over to you.
Okay, would anyone like to answer that question briefly?
Terence?
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a brief answer. I guess in some ways it's, I think, how do we begin to, I think part of just beginning to do anything is a step forward in bringing together two communities that can have a big impact. I think it's also just how do we start locally? What are some issues in our own local environment, and whether it's, I don't know, I was just thinking of, just off the top of my head, of, is there something we can do in terms of food and agriculture, and would having a garden where people are growing local food together, you know, Muslim and Catholics or Christians together, some way to just bring together people doing something, getting connected to the earth. Or, I don't know, tomorrow here on campus, I'm going to be part of a group giving a tour around campus. Then we're going to point out all these different invasive species on campus and how to be involved in biodiversity and thinking about going and removing some of those species. That would just be, I know we're pressed for time, but that would just be one thing of, I think just bringing together people is the first step, and how to build upon that as we go forward.
Thank you. And I believe Dr. Guma, you wanted to respond.
نحن في مصر قمنا بعدة مبادرات بالتعاون بين المسلمين والمسيحيين. ومن هذه المبادرات كانت خدمة والعناية بالصم والبكم. من هذه المبادرات كانت أمور ترجع إلى البيئة بقضية النظافة وإشاعة مفهوم النظافة والتعامل مع البيئة بمفهوم النظافة. وكان من ضمن هذه المبادرات أيضا، ونعتبرها أنها متعلقة بما نقول الآن، مقاومة فكرة التحرش بالأنثى باعتبار أن هذه القيمة وهذا الخلق يجب أن يشيع من أجل السلام الاجتماعي ومن أجل تمام التنمية. المبادرات التي عندنا وصلت إلى 130 مبادرة مثل هذه المبادرات. المبادرات أيضا هي القضاء على البطالة مثلا. وكان محاولة القضاء على البطالة بإنشاء مجالات للأعمال كانت مبادرات ما بين المسلمين والمسيحيين. شكلنا جمعيات خيرية ما بين المسلمين والمسيحيين من أجل هدف واحد، وأسميناها مثلا معا. كلمة معا لها دلالة، شملت قضايا الفنون وشملت قضايا أصحاب الهمم المعوقين، وشملت أيضا قضايا في البيئة. فالمبادرات كثيرة وكلها تصب في النهاية في بناء الإنسان وفي إنشاء بيئة صالحة حول هذا الإنسان من أجل أن يكون أكثر سعادة وأكثر رفاهة.
And more
شكرا.
prosperous. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're going to have to move along because time is running out. There is one more question that I would like us to get to on panel 1, and then we'll move into panel 2. For those of you who are listening to us via the World Wide Web and other social media, we're going to be going over just a few minutes, of course, so we hope you're able to stay with us. We have one more panel to get to. The next question that I have for this particular panel came to me. These have been wonderful presentations. However, I have a pragmatic question to all, and so anyone who would like to respond to this certainly can. My guess is that these messages go to a very small minority of people who are Muslim, Catholic, and otherwise. How, as leaders, do you send these messages to a much greater population? As a Catholic, I've never heard these messages from the pulpit, and my Muslim friends don't get this from their clerics either. Salam, peace. Who would like to take that? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
If I mind.
Dr. Rudy, yes.
Yeah. I believe the leadership, national leadership as matter. If we can find a national leadership or of Catholic, for example, or the national leaders of Muslim can be starting the dialogues at the high level together. And then with that starting, like on our experience in Indonesia, we can collaborate under that. And with that respected leadership, they have on authority of dialogues, they can be a good start. And we might exchange together these kind of experience and best practices. How then Indonesia, we have not only Catholic and Muslim, but also other religion. We have 7 faith group, Confucianism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and other. We are working together. We have what we call Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, which is very important to protect our forests together. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Chow, will you please introduce our next guest? Very briefly, let me just say that as we move into panel 2, this is on green faith and green recovery, theory and practice of climate commitment and sustainable development. And again, Professor Chai, will you please introduce our next guest?
Thank you. I noticed there's 2 more questions we didn't get to answer, but when we move to panel 2, if we get a chance, we will ask panel 2 speakers to answer if possible. So next, our speaker is Professor Dr. Saeed Iqbal Rossani. He is the Pro-Chancellor of Jamia Ahmadiyya University in India and Managing Director of Desert Site Training Institute in the UAE. And he is very accomplished educational admin. He has served as former Vice Chancellor of the University of Calcutta in India, and he was also a former professor of environmental science and Jawaharlal Nehru University in India. More importantly, I think her advice on Indian local government on glaciers of Himalayas, the change. So that's, I think, is very relevant to our webinar today. So, Dr. Saeed.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Dr. Shaujin. Let me begin by thanking the World Muslim Communities Council and Ansari Institute for Global Engagement for Religion, University of Notre Dame, for having me in this distinguished panelist on climate change and interfaith leaders. I must say, in the beginning itself, how we got here, how, as we know, I'm not going into the history of the climate change, but we know that now we are a global temperature, global Earth temperature is going to touch 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is a very, very critical number, because in Paris we have decided that it should never reach 2 degrees Celsius, but we are already there. And we have seen that the three big emitters are China, India, and United States. United States has done a lot of work, and even in today's global leaders conclave, President Biden has already said that they have already reduced from 2005 to this year about 25 to 26% of their carbon footprints. And they intend to do by 2030, 2025 about 50%. More than 50%. And similarly, other leaders are talking, the Chinese leaders are talking, Indian leaders are talking, and other European leaders are talking to reduce the emission levels. But we are still building up a lot of greenhouse gases, especially the carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, and things are not changing. We have seen the pandemic, and we are going through it. And in India, it is again, we are suffering by the second surge. A lot of people are being affected by that. But we have made already a vaccine for that. And not only one, but 3-4 kind of a vaccines. And we hope and that we will, inshallah, will come out by that pandemic, global pandemic, and then the world will be saved by this kind of a problem. But there is no vaccine for climate change. We are still, because nature never forgives. God can forgive, but nature never forgives, and it is there. So all these greenhouses are there. Now we see the extreme events are happening. Forest fires are happening, whether they are in Australia, California, all over the world. Droughts are happening. Water scarcity is happening. As I worked in the snow and ice resources, Himalaya is the third pole, as we call, the next to the Antarctica and Arctic. We have the largest number of glaciers and ice, seasonal ice and the permanent glaciers, but all melting. And has been reported by various scientific studies that in another 50 years, most of the 80 to 90% glacier will vanish, and there will be a big crisis we are going to face for 140 million people, which live in China, India, and other smaller countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, and all that. They will suffer hugely by that. So what we are going to do about that? So we have to be very serious. I think it is a good initiative that the faith leaders also chip in, and then they try to tell the communities, the religious leaders have the responsibility, and particularly the Muslims and the Christians, that they also articulate this danger, which is have no vaccine. We have to come together and solve this problem. And especially the smaller nations, nations like smaller island countries like Maldives and other smaller countries will face a huge rise in the sea levels. And what will happen if the sea level rises? As you have already read in the newspapers and other scientific reports, the sea level is already rising. And how the sea level is rising is a combination of factors. It's not that only the the polar ice is melting and that is contributing the water, but the expansion of the sea water because of the global temperature. It is absorbing a lot of heat into that, and it is expanding, and that is how it is affected the low-lying areas and other smaller countries. So we are going to face a very catastrophic situation in the years to come, and we have to combat. And this climate change is not happening because of the faith of one religion, because all of us, whether we believe in God or not believe in God, contributed to the climate, to the global warming. And this global warming has to be met with all our efforts, whether we are Muslims, Christians, Hindus, or whatever religion, or whether we believe in religion or not, but we have to come together and solve this problem. So there are a number of ways which we can do it, and many countries are started doing it, that we have to reduce the carbon footprints. Say, I can give an example of United Arab Emirates. They have started nuclear power plants. So they are going, though they are, they have a lot of oil resources, but still they are looking for the alternative energy resources. And they also have developed a huge solar energy panels and trying to have a green energy. And many countries are doing it. Even in China, in spite of they have the largest number of coal-fired power plants. But if you go to China, you can't see the next building in Beijing because so much is the pollution level by the emission of the coal-fired power plants. And that is same happening in India. So both India and China are contributing a huge number of these emissions, and they are talking, but they are not reducing. China said that we will reduce 50% of our coal-fired plants, but what they are doing it, they are making new power plants, coal-fired power plants. Similarly, India is also doing it. And that is how we are suffering. The human people, the common man, the poor people, the marginalized people is suffering because of this climate crisis. So we have to have a responsibility as a religious leaders also. Say, for example, in Islam, I think the followers of Islam, because I'm also a Muslim, we believe that we should be more proactive in telling and articulating the problem of the climate change. The priests in their Jummah prayers also talk about the climate change, how it is going to affect each and every one of us. So that is one way of dealing with this and bringing the religious leaders into the discourse of the climate change. So similarly, the Christian community is also doing, and they are also talking in their talks, in Sunday talks, they talk about the climate change, how the people are suffering. So every religious leader has a responsibility, and every activist has a responsibility to change the narrative of this. And people started looking seriously, because still in many countries people don't believe that there is a climate change. Even the United States, the last president was saying it's a hawk, it's nothing, there's nothing, no climate change is happening. But it is happening. I'm happy that the new administration has taken up it very seriously and is doing very serious thinking about it, and collected and they have this today's seminar on the global leaders and articulated the importance of the climate change. So climate change is real, it is happening, and is affecting all of us like the pandemic. So we have to find a solution, and we have all together find a solution for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Chow, do you have anything, Dr. Chai, do you have anything final to say before I
No,
introduce
I
Carol?
think please move to next.
Okay, thank you. Our next panelist is the Senior Director of the Office of Sustainability at the University of Notre Dame, Carol Mullany. Director Mullany focuses on partnerships with campus groups and individuals to advance the university's comprehensive sustainability strategy. She was recognized as a leader of change in higher education in 2016 by the NCCI, the Network for Change and Continuous Innovation. Following the teachings of Catholic tradition and mission, and further inspired by His Holiness Pope Francis, Director Mullany continues to assess the university's current sustainability practices and promote the future protection of God's creation at Notre Dame and beyond. As Pope Francis has stated, we need to have a conversation that includes everyone, since the environmental challenges we are undergoing affect us all. Director Mullany, thank you for joining us. We are listening. You have the microphone.
Thank you very much. I am so pleased to be with you and to be present with you today. I am going to share my screen here.
And Director Mullany, I'm going to introduce you, interrupt you just for a moment. If everybody would please mute their mic, we're getting a lot of back noise. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. So thank you for inviting me to join this very inspiring and esteemed group of speakers. I am the true practitioner here, so I am one who takes the learnings from all of you religious and academic leaders and then develops plans and actions to put these into place at this university, a Catholic university here at the University of Notre Dame. And so that is our challenge. We start, of course, with the strategy then. How does our faith inform the work that we do and the plans that we make? We have a comprehensive sustainability strategy. I have just one paragraph here, but at its foundation is our Catholic faith, our Catholic mission, and the teachings of Catholic social teaching, and especially Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si that many have referenced here. We have said that there's an indivisible link between environmental sustainability and the future of our institution. So we look at the foundations in faith, and you know, the teaching of our Pope, who says that we need to see what is at stake is our own human dignity. And this is really key to us now, not only our future generations, but the actions that we take are imperative for all of us as we think about the meaning of our life on this earth. So from a practitioner approach, we look at this at various levels. There are large activities that require significant collaboration, that require significant investment, and then there are small daily actions that we try to engage everyone in. So at that large level, I'll point out a couple of years ago, our university president co-hosted along with Cardinal Turkson at the Vatican, climate change accords, where they invited leaders, executives from energy and investor to really talk about major issues here, and came out of it with two major statements. One is support for carbon pricing, another which are disclosures on climate change risk at a very large national and global level, looking at that. But then we move into what we do within our environment here, within our campus. And this just shows you kind of the broad perspective that we use to approach sustainability here at our university. We have to start, of course, with education and research, because that is our mission as a university, right? We are educating future leaders, and that's probably the greatest impact that we can make, as well as conducting research that will aid and support all of these very noble efforts. So this is just a sample. You know, one thing about our work here at the University of Notre Dame is that coursework, academic work, and research really is conducted throughout every college and school that we have within this university. And I also point out here that that education is not just within the curriculum, but it is within everyday life. We have a photo here of our community garden, right? So it needs to be infused in our everyday life. As has been pointed out, one of the key goals for all of us is reduction of carbon emissions, and it's something that our global leaders are working on, but we have to work on ourselves. This just shows you an example of what we have done, the great investments that we've made. We continue to make them, diversifying our approach in terms of renewable and recoverable energy sources. And then looking at water, looking at all different aspects of what we do on our campus. Water is a little bit of a challenge for us in terms of where we live because it's fairly plentiful right now, but we have to take that responsibility seriously. One key action that we have several green roofs across our campus. This is the largest one, and it not only is a water action to preserve water and to reduce stormwater runoff, but it also helps our energy needs for heating and cooling. We look at this as we look at all of our built environment, whether they are new buildings, using the LEED certification criteria that we approach, but also in terms of how we reuse materials when we are building and renovating. Wanted to point out too that food is really a key area for us as we look at justice issues in our local community, as we look at waste issues. Couple of key initiatives that we've taken. One would be food rescue. How do we distribute consumable food from our various operations to people in need? And then secondly, when we do have food waste that is non-consumable, how do we avoid it from being landfilled? And currently, we have a solution that takes it for anaerobic digestion. And then lastly, I'm just going to point out something, because as we think about the linkage between faith and our environmental and sustainability efforts, our grotto on the campus of the University of Notre Dame is one of the most revered places of prayer and spirituality. We had a project that we underwent over these past years to eliminate the waste, from the used grotto candles. It's a great story. It was written up in our Notre Dame magazine, if you have a greater interest in that. So with that, I will conclude my remarks here.
Carol, thank you so much for that presentation. Thank you all for wonderful presentations. You have added so much to this conversation. As I mentioned earlier, time is of the essence. We have gone a bit beyond time. And I do want to see if we can get to at least one, maybe two more questions. And then Dr. Chai, I believe you have a guest that's going to close us out, make a few brief comments. Is that still the case?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I do have a question that came in a bit earlier, and I'd like to raise it. And whoever would like to take it, please do so. How can the world faith communities unite to influence the greatest polluters in the world to change their ways? For example, oil industry, fossil fuels. Who would like to take that one? Dr. Guma.
I believe that this is something that is difficult to achieve, and that we may not really make this an objective, because behind those pollutants and those polluters, behind them, they are supported actually by money. They are doing this to earn money. And what is driven by the need for financial gains, it is difficult to target it directly. That is why, if we want to eradicate this phenomenon, we should be able to besiege the phenomenon itself and use drama and use the media and use the different media platforms and this continuous effort against the polluting activities to shape a public opinion in this regard. But we should not consider them a direct target for us. This is something that will be hard to obtain in a single step. This is something that should be done or accomplished via a number of steps. We should not view this as the short-term objective, nor the primary objective for us. We should have a plan, a long-term plan, to be able to besiege those pollutants and those polluters and not to eradicate them directly, because they are seeking to obtain financial gains, and this is something that is ingrained in their nature, and this is part of their nature. They will not allow, and they will be fighting this ferociously. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move to our final speaker. Dr. Chai, would you please introduce him?
Yes, thanks for your patience, and especially thanks for Dr. Mohammed Bishari. Thanks for your patience to be the last conclusion speaker. Dr. Bishari is the Secretary General of the World Muslim Community Council. He's originally from Morocco and is a leader and a prolific and dynamic public figure in the landscape of European Islam. And he is the president of the French National Federation of Muslims, among many other organizations. So, Dr. Bishari, floor is yours.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أولاً شكراً
First of all, I would like to thank all the speakers, the eminences, and the excellencies, and the holiness, the participants in this webinar, which comes us to a holiday for Muslims, which is the Friday Eve, and it is a great day, and it is also one of the days of the month of Ramadan, and this day as well is a day where the entire world celebrates the Earth Day, and the day that is dedicated to protect the environment and nature. This is a reminder to the people of high ethical values and to religious individuals and believers and religious leaders to remind the followers of this gift, this divine gift to humanity, nature. I mean the gift of nature, which has been dedicated to humanity and to human beings. 8 out of 10 people in the world consider themselves religious in a way or another. So, at the time where religion does not control the general aspects of people's life and the management of public affairs in many countries of the world, yet the sense of belonging to a certain religion or a certain
موجود وكائن عند كل إنسان. ف8 على 10 فهو رقم كبير ومهم. معناه أن هذه الأديان سوف تجعلنا أصدقاء للبيئة وأصدقاء هذه البيئة لكي يعملون سويا من أجل الحفاظ عليها. المداخلات تركزت على كلمة سواء، على هذا الذي يجمع بين united approach and the common element among all religions. We have one destiny because the planet on which we live makes it necessary for all of us to live together. إما أن نعيش في سلم وسلام، وهذا خيار الأديان وخيار أصحاب الثقافات المستنيرة وأصحاب الفلسفات الوضعية التي تجعل من الإنسان رمزاً ومحركاً ومحوراً لإيديولوجياتها ومشاريعها الفكرية من أجل إسعاد الإنسان من خلال الحفاظ على هذا المكتسب وعلى هذه الهبة وعلى هذه الأمانة، أمانة الاستخلاف في الأرض. المداخلات ركزت كذلك على ليس أننا نتخطى المشترك الإنساني الموجود بين جميع الأديان، فهذا كأنه خطاب يمشي على كل ويسري ويسبح في كل الأديان والمذاهب. لكن ذهب عدة مداخلات إلى البحث عن مبادرات. تكلم السادة أصحاب الفضيلة وأصحاب السماحة والسعادة عن إطلاق المبادرات من أجل الحفاظ على الحياة وعلى مكونات هذه الحياة، من الحفاظ على البيئة وعلى الحيوان وعلى البحار وعلى الطيور وعلى كل ما يمكن أن يكون ثروة وقيمة مضافة لهذا الكون. أختم بكلمة ونحن في دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة، كلمة توجيهية من حكيم العرب الشيخ زايد بن سلطان آل نهيان طيب الله ثراه، مؤسس الدولة، في خطابه بمناسبة يوم البيئة الوطني الأول في الدولة عام 1998 يقول: نحن شغوفون ببيئتنا لأنها جزء لا يتجزأ من وطننا وتاريخنا وإرثنا. لقد عاش أجدادنا في البر والبحر واستطاعوا الصمود في هذه البيئة على الرغم من جميع تحدياتها، وبالطبع ما كانوا ليفعلوا ذلك لو لم يدركوا ضرورة المحافظة على البيئة بأن يأخذوا منها حاجتهم فقط من مقومات البقاء، ويحمونها من أجل الأجيال القادمة بإذن الله. وبإذن الله سنتابع العمل على حماية البيئة والحياة الفطرية في بلادنا كما فعل أجدادنا من قبل، وإذا ما أخفقنا لا قدر الله في القيام بهذا الواجب سيلوموننا أبناؤنا على تبديد جزء أساسي من إرثهم ومن تراثنا. شكرا لكم، وكل سنة وأنتم والبيئة والطبيعة والأرض في ألف خير وسلم وسلام.
Dr. Bashari, thank you so much. Professor Chai, I'll give you just a few moments to close us out, and then I'll come back right after you and wrap things up.
Yeah, for me is my deep gratitude for all the dignitaries and excellencies and speakers who contribute this wonderful webinar, especially from our wonderful organizer, Ansari Institute of University of Notre Dame. You have been very professional and punctual and handling the webinars very well, despite this long distance and despite this diversity of speakers from different corners of the world. So my sincere thanks, as Dr. Bashari just mentioned, to all the organizers, especially our staff, from both the World Muslim Community Council and from Ansari Institute and Keough School of Global Affairs. And now I give to you.
Well, of course, as all of you know, all of you as panelists know this, and everyone listening in, this has been a stellar panel. Thank you very much for participating in this conversation with us titled Care for Our Common Planet, a Catholic Muslim Earth Day Conversation. Many of those who have been listening in have raised some very important questions. We were able to get to just a few of those. I've asked Josh Stowe, who is our senior content specialist, to let me have those questions afterwards, and we will try to send those questions out to you and give you the opportunity to respond to those who have been participating via social media. This event was presented by the Ansari Institute for Global Engagement with Religion and the World Muslims Communities Council, co-sponsored by the World Religions World Church Graduate Program, part of the University of Notre Dame's Department of Theology. Dr. Chai, it has been a pleasure moderating with you. Thank you for helping to put this event together. I look forward to our next conversation. I also want to thank Director Mahan Mirza of the Ansari Institute for agreeing to host this conversation, and special thanks to Josh Stowe, Senior Content Specialist, and Tim Checkley with Notre Dame IT, and of course, to our behind-the-scenes translators and IT department at the World Muslims Communities Council. To our audience in the United States, have a terrific afternoon. And to our audience in the United Arab Emirates and beyond, have a restful night. Best wishes during Ramadan. To everyone in between, thank you for joining us. Please be sure to visit our website at ansari.nd.edu and follow us on Twitter and YouTube for timely conversations and events. Until next time, inshallah, I'm Charles Powell. Goodbye.